Once again, good afternoon, everyone. First and foremost, let me thank our host for having us here. I'm extremely proud to do this historic trip to be with you today. Again, I apologize for the delay, but we stopped on our way in front of a mural that depicted the woman like freedom. We wanted to message back to our fellow compatriots in Iran that here in Israel, the relief people are standing in solidarity. So forgive me for the delay, but it was a necessary message to send. If I could describe in one word, so far, our trip here for the first time, I can only use one word: inspirational. And in Jerusalem, in that, truly inspired by the whole history and everything. There's a reason it's been said that blessed are the peacemakers. And the director was talking about this, showing us graphs about nuclear deployments or maritime intervention and all that. I hope that this center will soon be talking about rebuilding Iran, developing water resources, bringing investment in the most afflicted areas, rather than to worry about all that negativity that exists. That's why we are all here and hoping for the future. Now, my philosophy has always been never look back, always look forward. With one exception, we look back not to forget and remember the past. Because without that, we will never know where we're going. And therefore, why should the world be different? Because as it is, it's not the future that our children want to inherit. And we are here today knowing the consequences of not taking action at the most crucial time. This is the moment, one moment in history when the stars have aligned for change, for significant change, for decisive change. And we're in the center of academic studies and research, and there's thinking, and there is pondering, and it could even lead to planning. But at the end of the day, what makes the difference is making a decision, making a choice. And in this case, we have to ask, beyond the obvious commonality of interest that Israelis and Iranians have together as natural partners and allies, for the rest of the world to finally decide which side of history do they want to stand. Do they stand with us, or do they remain silent? Talking about inspiration, Martin Luther King once said, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. Having said that, and I would much rather hear your question and answer them than give you a lecture, even though it's a podium. Every time you get behind the podium, you get sort of like excited about talking. I've always been accused that I talk sometimes too much. So therefore, I try to be very brief. So what are we talking about? We're talking about every potential to become a reality. We don't need to start from scratch. The Iranian people are the most natural conduit to change. They're your natural army in place. And they have fought the battle completely without any means of support so far. And yet they have sustained the resistance. Imagine what they could do if they had real support. When we hear, and I talk to them all the time, including political prisoners, and they don't say, come and liberate us. They come and say, we'll do the job, but give us internet access. Give us funding so we can organize labor strikes, so we can finally push this regime over the cliff. For that, we need international support and coordination. For that, we need resources. For that, we need all those who understand that right after this regime is gone, we enter a period of transition. We have to think of the immediate future and then the long-term planning. We have to talk about a roadmap of what it would mean and the potential that Iranians, once liberated, will be able to achieve very fast. Because I won't even say year, I won't even say month, I would say every day that goes by, the opportunity cost to Iran is huge. Just on the environmental matter. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to come to Israel, besides the obvious, was also knowing that the best experts and scientists in the field can deal with our water crisis, which is not just an Iranian problem, it's a regional problem. But imagine if we don't address that. Our whole ecosystem depends on that. If we want to develop tourism tomorrow as a major industry, where are the people going to come and watch? Dried rivers in Isfahan? Dried lakes in Urumia? Gone marshlands in the south or the north?
Sinkholes.
Of course not. That's part of the whole perspective of how meaningful it could be, of bringing more stability and more investment and more development, as opposed to more instability. More people will have to leave their areas of living because there's simply no more water left. Anyway, I'm not going to go too much into details, but I'm sure you understand how consequential it could be every second we wait. So the call to action is now, and our messaging to Israeli citizens, to the world over, is stand in solidarity with the Iranian people. Help us bring maximum support. Give us all the tools and the means that they need to overcome this evil regime. And they have already demonstrated their willingness to die for freedom. They know where they want to go. All they need is an extra hand. And I hope that as a result of this trip, I've been able to attract attention to the issue, to prove to the whole world that the Islamic regime in Iran is an aberration and not the norm. And I hope that any reference from here on is to tell that we make a distinction between Iran and its people and the Islamic regime ruling them. I know it's not done on purpose, but I implore you to not use the term Iran when you talk about the regime. Use the term the Islamic regime versus the Iranian nation and people. You show clearly that you know the distinction between the two. That's important to build it into the narrative. And finally, I would say that maintaining the momentum is also very important. Because no movement based on civil disobedience and nonviolence could maintain long duration without that extra support. In fact, it's been proven, we've seen in recent history. Look at Lech Walesa in Poland. It was sustained support until finally it reached its end. It was sustained support and calling for an end to apartheid that finally forced the apartheid regime to sit down in negotiation with Nelson Mandela and the ANC and ultimately put an end to that regime. The difference is that with this regime you can't negotiate because their DNA is simply different than the rest of us. We are talking about a value system where Iranians are seeking the very same liberties and the very same guarantees of freedom of faith, of religion, of ideology, of sexual orientation, or what have you, guaranteed under the rule of law, a secular democratic system with a clear separation of religion from state, which is the only way we can guarantee the freedom of any faith in our country. We've learned this by showing the example of other democratic countries that have had that. That's what we want in our country as well. And this is ultimately our ask from the world. Have faith that the Iranian people share your same values, as opposed to a regime that is dead set against all these values. A regime that prefers to celebrate death and martyrdom, as opposed to a nation that has always celebrated life as you have and we have, in our poetry, in our beliefs and everything. We can make this a reality. We can make this a reality. We're not that difficult. It's not. giving me this opportunity, and our biggest debt of gratitude to Gila, Minister. I think in the span of a few days is beyond just we want to call it a political relationship, but really a personal friendship.
Political exploitation.
Any comments, questions? I'm here to answer them.
Political exploitation. אבל אנחנו לא נגיד את זה בקורבן.
In order not to be accused of being partial, can somebody moderate the Q&A so I don't point to anybody in particular?
سلام، من اورژوئن هستم. دانشجویان در این دانشگاه و می‌خواستم بزرگترینتون ببخشید.
نفس بکش.
در موزه اسرائیل در اورشلیم من تقریباً 2 ماه پیش نمایشگاه ساختم برای زن زندگی آزادی. تقریباً 50 تا
הצוות של התערוכה של 5 במוזיאון אמנות האסלאם. לא.
من همین چند روز آخر شما اینجایید، از ایران همش پیام میدن که شما میایید حمایتشون کنید، زن زندگی آزادی هستن. همین خیلی مهمه که از اونجا رد بشید.
اگه بخواد که شما اتفاقاً Can I respond in English so everybody will understand? Well, I mean, the question was, well, it would be so important to, acknowledge all the art collected in the Museum of Art. And in fact, we were trying to do that yesterday, but the museum closed before we had a chance to get there.
24 hours.
Okay. Well, then next time.
شاهزاده قول دادی.
Next time יצטרך לשלם 44 שקלים בכניסה.
It was not with the intention to ignore, but we attempted this, and then between meetings and yesterday going back to Jerusalem after our visit to the water center, there simply wasn't enough time to squeeze it in, and we have to prioritize.
His Majesty, you have seen the people, the nations all around the Western world support the Iranian people. You have led the Iranian LA and all the capitals in the Western world. Unfortunately, we haven't seen the leaders themselves of the Western democratic countries support the Iranian people under a totalitarian regime. Why is that?
But I don't know if it's necessarily true that there is no support. I would just say there's not maximum support. And that's where the difference lies. Because a lot of it could be certain legislation, certain restrictions, certain sanctions, but to really put the extra pressure. For instance, so many Iranians who are stuck in Iran or are unable to travel, and yet the regime's representative can travel freely. Their children, their relatives are all over the place, laundering money on behalf of the regime in countries from Canada to even the UK. And of course, when we ask them, well, what's the next step? What are you going to do? They say, well, we have a hostage right now over there, and we're trying to negotiate that. And I tell them, listen, you have to stand in unison. It should not just be the French president's problem, or the British prime minister's problem, or the Belgian prime minister's problem. If you all are going to stand together and say, we will not accept blackmail as a tool for diplomacy. Because the minute you're weak, you legitimize and encourage the regime to do more. In fact, if we look at the history of the last 40 years, there are tacit examples of every time there was absolute strength of position vis-a-vis this regime, they backed up. The minute you showed weakness, they took every advantage of it. rewind tape. It's easy to do. The element is there. So what we are asking, and that's where people's power comes into play. This is where people make the difference. And we live in a world of social media, where we no longer need intermediaries. No longer can a major news network claim that, well, I don't have a reporter on the ground in Tehran or Isfahan to know what's going on. You will find it on TikTok or on Twitter or on Instagram within seconds. Nobody can pretend that they don't know the reality on the ground. The question is, don't tell me you don't know. What are you going to do about it? I think that's pretty much what we need to do. The world needs to tell to their legislators, whether you live in France or in United States or anywhere else. Because politicians understand one thing, votes and re-election. And guess what? If you don't listen to us, we'll kick you out of office and put somebody else who can't get the job done. That should be the message. That they understand.
Yes.
I can't do anything about it. But you who can vote can make the difference. By forcing your legislator to make the decision, to force your politician to be on the right side of history. That's what it's all about. The Iranian people are providing you with the proof. The rest is up to you to say, we demand our politicians to take action. That's how change will ultimately occur.
شاهزاده عزیز بازم دوباره خیلی خوش اومدین.
Dear Shahzadeh, dear Crown Prince, welcome again. We are so excited to meet you. And this is my mother who was rewarded from your mother. So.
سالیان سال و شهبانو فرح هم یک ماه یه دفعه می اومد با همون حرف می‌زد، بچه ها رو می‌برد و خیلی خیلی من خوشحالم از اینکه الان شما رو می‌بینم مثل برادر خودم، مثل بچه خودم می‌تونم واقعا من خوشحالم. مثلا عکس شما رو با بچه خودم دیدم، اون لحظه یادم اومد که خودم با شهبانو فرح عکس انداختم و با هم حرف می‌زدیم مثل مادر و دختر خواهر. خیلی خیلی من خوشحالم و الان من یه وقتا اینقدر دلم تنگ میشه میگم خدایا چرا این چیزا رو از ما گرفتی و به امید خداوند عالمیان که همین امروز روز پنجشنبه که تو راه رو در آوردن حکمتی کند که به شما هم برگردید به ایران و ما هم
By the way, you know mothers are always right.
But it was not planned, so. But as you said, the mother. So my question is very short. I noticed that the natural thing that is that everyone reacts to the action that it goes toward him. Every person. But you don't react to the actions of the regime, to all that things that they said in 3-4 days, that maybe they say that we can ignore this visit. Very sorry, it's not important for us. He is not important. What is this strategy? How don't you react to them? It's very strange. I myself meet it for the first time. So. How you came to this conclusion?
Well, actually, I think that's a great sign that they don't know what to say because it's lose-lose.
Exactly.
If they ignore it, it's a loss. If they say something against it, it's also a loss. That's something that I won't name the names, but one of the high-ranking officials here said in analysis that tells us that they really don't know what to say. So, frankly, we should ignore the fact that they don't have anything to say and focus on what we have to say instead. And what we have to say is that the end for this regime is near and that we have a replacement plan. But there's a reason I'm saying this right now, because in 1978, a few months before my father was leaving the country, as the revolution was coming to its ultimate climax. Let us not forget, that's the part I was saying, we should not forget certain things. The anti-regime elements, oddly enough, many members of the academia back then, in this revolutionary ideal, used to say, let's get rid of the Shah, then we'll see what happens. Well, guess what happened? Which is why today I'm saying we should not just say that this regime has to go, then we'll see what happens. Learning from that past. We should be clear as to what the alternative could be. And in that narrative, I've always said that my life's mission and the role, and the only role that I have volunteered to play for my fellow compatriots has been to see the situation all the way through the day, that at the end of Majlis Muassasan, our Constituent Assembly, which is where the ultimate debates will have to be made on areas that the secular democratic forces that are fighting against this regime may disagree on the ultimate content and form, would propose that future constitution, would propose the political alternative, and at the end of the day, the ballot box, which is the only means to weigh and gauge the actual will and choice of a nation, will elect through a referendum and adopt that future. And I've always said that day is the end of my political mission in life for my fellow compatriots. That's the process. It's a democratic process. It's something that the democratic world should understand and should support, because there's no other means to reach a democratic solution, an alternative, without going through this process. So we're not just saying, okay, we already have a replacement in the fridge, we're going to take it out and just throw it there. No. It's not as simple as we think. There's a process, but we know exactly how it's going to happen. We're going to guarantee that all voices will be heard, that there will be equal opportunities and right to be represented through that Namayandegan Mardom. And of course, the question that is not too clear, but we can also address, is what happens during the transition? What happens on D+1, the day after the collapse of this regime? That, I think, is the most sensitive, critical period. What happens in that period of transition, which realistically speaking will take maybe 2 to 3 years? Not more, because we cannot extend it too far. But what happens? What is the responsibility of a transitional government? How is it composed? How many elements within the country can be part of it? How much is the role of the exterior opposition? How many people can show up at the right time? Because if they were to come into the picture prematurely, obviously they'll be immediately identified and arrested. So there's a delicate balance there. But this, I'm trying to invite you to think the process and not just say we want to get rid of this and we will immediately have a solution. It's very important that we address this if we want to stick to the manner in which we want to reach that alternative. That should really be our actual focus and discourse and discussion and analysis. So with that, any kind of study, any kinds of debates, any kinds of thinking will be greatly useful and necessary for this process to successfully reach its conclusion.
זהו?
The minister wanted to give you something, so...
סליחה.
מנכ"ל משרדים אילן כהן, הוא גם יוצא העדה הפרסית, נולד באיראן, עלה לארץ בגיל 5, רק שתכירו אותו גם על הדרך. טוב,
אל תכירו, אני חושבת שזה זה.
In 1974, His Majesty, the Shah of Iran, your father, sent a message to Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin and offered his help to promote peace between Israel and Egypt. So this is the letters that show that. You are following his footsteps to realize peace and friendship between our nations. And I believe that like your father imagined it before it happened, so now and today, thank of all what you are doing, and you're brave, that you are so brave that you come to Israel, and together we will bring the peace between Iran and Israel. So thank you for your courage, thank you for your vision, and we all, like you see in Israel, love you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to call Dr. Sofer to conclude.
לא נותנים לכולם לשאול. סמק. טוב, זהו, נגמר הנאום שלו.